So welcome everybody to this latest video on 162 Math, and in this video we'll be going over some AS level indices exam style questions. Now if you're wanting a copy of the questions, feel free to download and click on the link in the description where you can have an attempt at these questions before watching through this video as we go through the answers. Now before we get started working through these exam questions based around indices, I would always recommend that you always look at how many marks are available. Now this will usually indicate how much working is needed or how long it should take you to complete the question, and I would always go on the assumption of a minute a mark, so you're not spending too much time on them. So let's have a look at our first set of questions. Our first set of questions refer to multiple choice and are usually only 1 mark, simply because you can't really show any working out because it's either you've selected the right option or you haven't. However, you may need to do some doodling or some working out on the side to help you get the correct answer. So looking at question 1, we've got a fractional power and a negative power. So the key thing to remember here is that with our base number, when we have a fraction, the numerator refers to a power and the denominator refers to the root, and then when we've got a minus, that becomes a reciprocal. So from this, what we've then got is to understand, so we get rid of the minus, so we have 1 over e to the power of 2 over 5, which then becomes 1 over the 5th root of e squared, and that is our first option. With question 2, so here we've got a square root and we've got a multiplication with two base numbers being the same, so it's an option between what you're wanting to do here. So looking at this, let's start by simplifying what's inside the square root. So here our base is the same, so we've got to add the powers rather when multiplying. So then here what we've got is a to the, now if the common denominator is going to be 15, I could easily have just used a calculator, but there you go. And so I've got a and we've got 6 over 15, so that then becomes a, and it's going to be 16 over 15. And then what we've then got to do is we've got to square root. Now another way of square rooting this is to have to the power of a half. So here what we're doing is we're going to half 16/15. So that then becomes a to the 8 over 15, which is our third option. Then moving on to our question 3. So here we've got 64 and we've got to write down, find the values of p, q and r. So with part AI, we've got 64 equals 8p. Now what you want to try and do is to try and get the base numbers the same. Now looking at the right hand side, you might think to yourself, well, we can look at writing both of those as a power of 2. However, we want to try and work with 8. Now I can write 64 with a base number of 8 using powers. So 64 is 8 squared. So then what I've then got is 8 squared equals 8p. And so, oh, did I write 8p like that? So let's write it correctly. And so these two things here must be the same. So p equals 2. Moving on to this next one, and let's try, I hope this is a thinner pen. Yeah, we have. So here, another way of writing 64 is 1 over 8 squared equals 8q. And then I want to rewrite this, so I'm going to use power. So that then becomes 8 to the minus 2 equals 8q, so q equals minus 2. Then here, how do we represent a square root? Well, r is just going to equal a half. Then moving on to b, what we're going to do is we're going to use the components of what we've found to try and work with this. So here what we've got, so if I take the left hand side, now if it's not come out great on the screen, but that's 8 to the x divided by the square root of 8, which is 8 to the x over 8 to the power of a half. When we're dividing, we take away the power, so that then becomes 8 to the x minus a half. Now another way of writing, let me just make this pen a little bit thinner. So taking this and looking at part AII, we can write that as 8 to the power of minus 2. And so from this, what I've got is that, and these two powers, because the base numbers are the same, those two must be equal. So x minus a half equals minus 2. So if I take the half over to the side by adding a half, x equals, and it's going to be minus 3 over 2 or minus 1.5, whichever floats your boat. Moving on to question 4, again very similar question. So here what I want to do is focus on trying to get the base numbers the same. I don't know why I've crossed that out, so let's get rid of that. So here I want to write 8 as a power of 2, and so that's going to be 2 to the power of 3 equals 2p. So these two things must equal the same, so p equals 3. For question AII, so here again I want to write that as 1 over 2 cubed equals 2q, as and where q is a power. And so then from that I've got 2 to the power of minus 3 equals 2q. So those two things must be equal. So here we've got q equals minus 3. And then here we've got 2 to the half equals 2r. So r equals a half. There we go. Then moving on to B, we're just using our answers. So that's going to be 2 to the half multiplied by 2x equals, and that's going to be 2 to the power of minus 3. So here then I've got 2, and then we add the powers, so that's going to be x plus a half equals 2 minus 3. So x plus a half equals minus 3 minus the half, so x equals minus 7 over 2. Oh, do not know what number that looks like. 7 over 2 or minus 3.5. Now typically I'll leave it as a fraction, but if you were to write it as a decimal, technically they are the same value, but I personally would always opt for writing things as fractions. Moving on to question 5, again very similar question. So this then becomes p equals a half. For this one we've got 1 over, and that's going to be 3 squared, so that then becomes 3 to the minus 2. So q equals minus 2. And again, this is virtually exactly the same question, but written with different numbers. So that's going to be 3 to the x plus a half equals 3 to the minus 2. So x plus a half equals minus 2. So x equals minus 5 over 2 or minus 2.5. Then moving on to question 6, which is our last question that we're going to look at from this particular set of questions. So this, we're going to rewrite this. So here I've got x, it's going to be a fraction because I've got a combination of roots and powers, and that's going to be 3 to the power of 4. So therefore k, well I don't need to write k equals because it's not asking me to write k, it's just asking me to write it in the form of x to the power of something. Then with B, what we want to do here, now this is something that you probably need to be aware of that you can actually do. So what I'm going to do here is I'm going to break the fraction up into 2 components. Now looking at those denominators, let's just write that using indices. So that then becomes 1 over, let's not use a chunky pen. So that then equals 1 over x to the power of 3 over 4 minus x squared over x to the power of 3 over 4. Then looking at this, that then becomes x to the power of minus 3 over 4. And looking at that one, well here we take away the powers, so that's going to be x, and it's going to be 2 minus 3 over 4. And so that then becomes x to the minus 3 over 4 and minus, and then here I would probably write that as a decimal just to make sure, but you could easily just use your calculator. But that's going to be 1.25, and 1.25 as a fraction is going to be 5 over 4. Can I do anything with that? No, so I just leave it as that because it's asking me to write it where p and q are going to be, whatever they are going to be fractions in this case, and that there is our final answer.